Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that gives you the movies well worth watching, even if there are some duds along the way. Combining questions, trivia, and games, every episode we're challenged to watch a piece of film history to decide whether it deserves to be remembered for all time in our movie vault. With every film chosen in our previous episode, it's the perfect way to watch and discuss along at home. But don't just take my word for it. Here's a snippet of what to expect in today's episode. Does that mean then there's like a moment in which they like look at you, like sat down at the restaurant and they're like, surprise me? And like,
oh yes, I'm also Anthony Igor. And they bring me, that's the thing, they bring me the movie, which reminds me of an earlier movie that I have seen, which is the movie Ratatouille. And I have the Ratatouille Proustian moment, except with the movie that reminds me of Ratatouille, like his Ratatouille reminded him of his mother's Ratatouille. Oh, this is brilliant. This is excellent. And then, of course, there will be a big dance party.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Are you not entertained?
Wait! I'll be back.
Here's Johnny.
You're a wizard.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
I'm Batman.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Well, good movies.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that gives you the movies well worth watching, even if there are some duds along the way. I'm your host, David Oscar, and I'm joined by the cowboy to my Indian, Craig McDonald. Hello, Craig.
I just want to check. Before the recording, you said, okay, I need to brush up on my French. Was that just so you could say bonjour, bonjour, bonjour?
It was for the name of this film.
All right. Yeah, you can see this is how the dynamic of us being cowboys and Indians, considering all I seem to do is just hunt you down.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried if you do have like a sort of gun hidden somewhere at the moment, or maybe
let's not make this sound any more sexual than it needs to be, David.
So as we alluded to there, Craig, we talk about movies well worth watching despite duds along the way. So just to tease the audience at home, and this is probably the one which I have the least idea about whether what your answer is going to be, but yeah, was it a dud or well worth watching?
Honestly, David, I think I'm in love.
Okay. There's going to be some French music going on later on, some piano. Craig's going to be playing piano by the end of this podcast. So, yeah, we'll find out why Craig is in love later on. But for those who didn't catch our previous episode, how on earth did we get to this film, Craig? And can you give us a recap on what we talked about in the previous episode?
Yeah, so in last episode, Endgame, it was a climactic battle between Paul Hunt and Kalichi. And in the end, just because of having a little bit more RNG luck at guessing whether or not a character's from the DC universe or not, Paul was victorious, and he decided that because we were looking for what we would describe as a niche animated film, he suggested to us A Town Called Panic. And honestly, I don't know how you can get any more niche than this film. It is a film entirely of stop motion and just weird, badly painted little figurines. And yet, here we are. We are discussing this film. I also think this is the first film that we've actually covered on this podcast which is not in English.
That's true, actually, yeah. Yeah, I didn't think that. And I also love Paul's link of, you know, the reason that we've talked about previous films is directors and people who star in them. His link was just pure chaos, just the theme of chaos. So
yeah, because we were talking about The Dark Knight and the entire premise of that film being the Joker, being the arbiter of chaos, turning people such as Harvey Dent into Two-Face, being another agent of chaos. With the coin flip, he was just, no, I'm just going to take it in the comical sense of just this is an entirely weirdly slapstick sort of film that just, I have no idea what's going on.
Exactly. It's it'll be a fun one to dive into today, and thankfully we got some fantastic guests with us to be talking all about it. So yeah, we'll be discussing A Town Called Panic later on, and undertaking our usual task of deciding whether it goes into the movie vault, our vault of movies that celebrate chosen films for all time. But first of all, let's go to those guests who will be discussing today's film with us. They are both returning guests, but it's been a while since we've spoken to them both, so it'll be a good chance to catch up. First of all is lecturer and animation expert, Dr. Sam Summers. Hello, Sam.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. I hope you're okay. I know you've been under the weather.
I've had a bit of the old the coronavirus. I don't know if you've heard of it. The coronavirus. It's a bit of a niche disease.
Yeah.
Not sure. Sort of, I would say the biological equivalent of a town called Panic. You know, it's kind of a bit out there. Not many people are into it yet. But let me tell you, when you catch it, you'll know about it.
Yes, it's kind of like they're like cowboy and stuff, just like madly dotting around like what.
It's it's been, this is my second round of the vid, and it is not as bad as the first one, to be honest. I had a bit of Delta, that was fun. Omicron, sort of the slightly less impactful sequel, but it's not bad.
Yeah, it's and more of these variants come out, they sound more and more like Transformers to me as well, which so
yeah, Omicron.
So I don't know if by the end of this, if you are collecting all of the Transformers to eventually become some sort of transforming planet, Sam, maybe that's where you're going. Yeah, well, last time you were on, we had a fantastic chat all about Shrek, which was well timed with the anniversary. There was a lot of stuff going on at that time in terms of Twitter, people talking, about like dissing Shrek, and then, you were there defending Shrek online. It was really well timed, and yeah, we were just talking about like the franchise as a whole, so specifically talking about the first film, the second film, kind of DreamWorks as a whole, and that was before your Shrek Symposium. So since then, you've held that, and you've held sort of other sort of educational events as well, looking at DreamWorks. How have they all been?
Yeah, fun times. The Shrek Symposium, 2 decades of Shrek, an academic symposium is what I think it was called. It was a while ago. That was back in November. Yes, that was great. We had like around 100 people rocked up on Zoom to watch academics from all sorts of different fields talk about different aspects of the movie Shrek. It was honestly a right laugh. One of my favorite things I've ever done, to be honest. Only shame, I guess, was that it was on Zoom and not in person, but then more people could attend on Zoom, so that's a benefit as well, really. And hopefully within the next, if I'm being honest, couple of years, you'll probably see the conference in book form as well, with people writing up their talks as chapters in a book. That's the plan for the next step of my Shrek journey.
It's gonna be following you for the rest of your life now, Sam. Just like you'll have Shrek on your grave.
I know. I really hope not. I think I did my PhD on Shrek. That started in 2014, and then I turned that into a book that came out in 2020, and then I was like, all right, that's it, that's me done with Shrek. And then I was like, oh, actually no, crap, it's the anniversary next year, I'm gonna have to do something for that. And now that looks like it's going to turn into a book, so that's at least another 2 years of Shrek. And yeah, it's just when I think I'm out, he pulls me back in with his big strong green hands.
That just sounds like a second verse of Shrek is Life, Shrek is Love.
Honestly, that's what it feels like. Shrek has been both life and love for me, non-consensually, for the last, 8 years. It's too long.
And Puss in Boots has just had a trailer as well. He's, even that guy's following you.
Yeah, like, Puss in Boots is back.
When was that? Like the last film was like what, 2010 or something like that? It's
been a big
gap between it. So
that's got to be a stealth like setup for Shrek 5, right? It has to be. They're definitely going to do it. If there's a Puss in Boots movie coming out, surely there'll be a post-credit scene teasing whatever's next for Shrek. It's got to happen.
Yeah, it's just one of the characters comes in like, I'm from the Fairy Tale Initiative. They're gathering all the DreamWorks heroes together. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's Jerry Seinfeld comes in as in the bee and assembles them all.
The DreamWorks Avengers. Yeah.
But yeah, obviously we sort of become aware of you, Sam, through the Disniversity podcast as well. Recently, it's been very fun. I know as a listener, this was a sort of era of Disney that I was looking forward to hearing yourself and your host, Ben Travis, talk about, which is the dark age of Disney. So you guys have been going through all of the kind of in between the Renaissance, which was Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and everything like that, and coming after things like Sleeping Beauty. So you've had some wonderful discussions about things like Fox and the Hound, and what I loved was you guys talking about Oliver and Company for like 2 hours, like one of your longest discussions ever, because I know that album has been like on my iTunes for years, especially Why Do I Worry? So to hear two people sort of loving that for like 2 hours, I was like, yes, this is perfect.
Yeah, it was really apt that turned into our longest episode. Ben hadn't seen it before. I wasn't sure if he was going to like it anywhere as much as I do. I've been obsessed with it for years. It's got everything you would want. It's got New York. It's got like weird, slightly out of place in a Disney movie references to modern culture. It's got Billy bloody Joel. It's got everything you need, man. And Ben loved it as well, and it ended up being our longest episode, which I love that we managed to do that we managed to go for so long, like about twice as long as we talked about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. We talked about Oliver and Company, and
I did very much appreciate the Bette Midler love as well, singing the song from that. There's been times in the past in which I was like, oh, I need like some sort of like morning song, some song like as an alarm. I was like, maybe that song, like she's like waking up.
Oh yeah, she's waking up, putting our makeup on. Girl, we got work to do. Yeah, perfect.
Great way to wake up.
It's always the ending of that song that I just have ingrained in my mind. I don't know why, just the way she sort of strolled. Well, I say she is in Bette Midler, obviously the dog character played by Bette Midler. Just strolling down the stairs, just belting it out, and just, yeah, I also am on the bandwagon for love for Oliver and Company. Once I can get past Once Upon a Time in New York City, which genuinely bums me out a little bit too much, then the film, yeah, it's a great time.
I'm glad I'm in a pro Oliver and Company room. It's great company to be in.
And of course, at the moment, you're coming on when the Oscars are about to happen. So that is always a big part of the animation community, is sort of awards season. You got the animated feature film category for the Oscars, which tends to be dominated by Disney a lot of the time.
When does this episode go out? Will this be after the Oscars?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this will be after the Oscars. Yeah, so I didn't think that through, did I?
Right. Okay. Well, in that case,
Sam, how happy are you about the winner of the Oscars?
So Sam from the past thinks that Encanto is probably going to win, but I would like the Mitchells versus the Machines to win. I think that's easily the best animated movie from last year. I liked Encanto a lot. It's a strong year. Raya and the Last Dragon, not my favorite Disney movie. Luca, the Pixar film, I thought is a really great film from them. I think that's one of the best they've done in a while. And Flea is the other one, the Danish animated documentary, which is the first film to be nominated for Best Animation, Best Documentary, and Best Foreign Film, which is amazing in and of itself. I suspect it might win documentary, but it'll not have a chance in animation because everyone, just all the old people who don't even watch movies anymore, just vote for whatever the grandkids like. And this year, I think that's going to be Encanto. So Mitchells and the Machines should have won, but Encanto will have won. That's where I think we're going to be at when this episode goes out.
Over to our next guest, who also has usual opinions on the Oscars and all the films that are coming out as well. He's joined us previously. Last time we were talking about James Bond, but a completely different sort of category today. It is filmmaker and writer Niall Glynn. Hello, Niall.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Good. I'm a little miffed, to be honest, because you've got Sam on here, and Sam, of course, has his Shrek Symposium and all that. And like I'm doing my master's on the Boss Baby. So I feel you just added a lot of unnecessary rivalry to the night.
Well, hang on. Back up. You're doing the master's on the Boss Baby.
No, this was a bit.
Oh. Well, I was really thrown. I know people who do academic work on the Boss Baby. I was speaking at a conference about the Boss Baby a couple of months ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've got a I've got an article coming out about the Boss Baby in an upcoming book, The Oxford's Companion to Children's Film. Oxford are publishing my piece on the Boss Baby, so I thought it was feasible.
I was going to say a legitimate source to cite there.
Yeah, I'd love it if you never found out it was a bit and like Niall was invited to some sort of academic conference.
Yeah, I'd be on the phone. Yeah, I'd be like,
but I would literally be a baby in a suit. I wouldn't know what I would be doing. Even when I do a bit, I just show how little I know. That I'm not an expert at anything in particular, but happy to be on.
Yeah, we're talking about animation and stuff now as well, which is, a big part of filmmaking and, awards season and that kind of stuff. And I know you've kind of had, your turbulent relationship over the past 2 years with, these Disney films and Pixar, etc. What's your kind of history with animation and Pixar, Disney, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the first film I actually ever remember seeing in the cinema was A Bug's Life. And before that, I'd seen Toy Story like 100 times. And that was kind of like my big thing as a child, was Pixar films. And it's funny because I always thought there was a distinction, and it might be to do with how they wrote their films or approached them, where I never quite took to Disney films the same way, even at like that kind of age where you latch onto these things. Although my school, for some reason, kept showing us all the really old, scary ones. So those are the ones I remember best being traumatized by. But no, I have my ups and downs with both companies now. Like Sam said, I thought Luca was excellent, and I was also very lukewarm on Soul. I think it's weird. I'm enjoying the fact their current films are focusing on what if kids have problems, rather than like what if your soul is a ghost and it's Jamie Foxx and a cat and it's Tina Fey. And yeah, it's just spaghetti, And I'm really bad this year. I think I've only seen Luca and Raya. Those are the only two the Oscar-nominated animated films I've seen.
Oh, you haven't seen Encanto? You haven't seen Mitchell's?
No, and do you know why? And I feel bad is because Mitchell's was obviously always streaming. It's like if that was in cinemas, I would have seen it. But there's something to do with like sitting down to watch it. I just don't enjoy as much. That's why I haven't watched Turning Red as well.
That's the other side of the coin, isn't it? Because you can talk about how streaming brings these things to a wider audience, especially in a pandemic, but a cinema release draws attention to them in different ways. Like often streaming films don't get covered by the mainstream movie press in the same way that films do if they go to the cinema. So yeah, I would say sit yourself down, treat yourself to all three of those movies are really good. Turning Red's excellent. Mitchell's is fantastic. Encanto's good. Definitely. Have a night, man. You could get through all of those in like 4 hours.
Yeah, it's true. I have my current rule with Disney Plus, and Dave, I think, knows this because we are on a Star Wars podcast together, is I usually wait till there's a Star Wars thing out I want to watch, like a show, and that's when I get a month of Disney Plus to cover me for that. And then if there's other stuff on it, I'll catch up on that as well.
Lastly, now I'll talk about Disney Plus. Obviously, we're talking about animation and stuff like that, and I suppose that's where two kind of worlds collided, where we previously talked about Star Wars, and you said about the Mandalorians earlier as a Star Wars podcast. What did you think of Star Wars Visions? Do you think that's a great example of streaming being used for getting animation out there in a different way?
Yeah, this is one of those. Well, if you know me on the Mandalorians, I'm always like usually half complaining about something, even though I like to pretend to be positive. But no, I thought this was like just excellent. As an example of just letting people kind of go hog wild with a concept and not tying it down to meeting like brand guidelines, which I know Lucasfilm could be very tight with. And yeah, just really creative. And I've got very limited patience for anime generally. There's nothing against it. Just a lot of the time it doesn't quite work for me. Like I went to see Belle, which is like, have you seen it, Sam?
Yes, notably not nominated for Best Animated Feature, which is a shame because I'm assuming you're about to say that you didn't like it, but I thought it was great. I thought it was better than several of the films that are nominated.
Yeah, no, I don't dislike it. I admire it more than I enjoy it, if that makes sense. I think it had a great head and its shoulders and interesting themes. It's just, oh my God, I can't stand these songs. That kind of kills it for me.
The songs are aimed at Japanese teenage girls, so I don't think you're necessarily the audience. But yeah, I can stand by that. Yeah.
But back to Star Wars. which I like to talk about anything but, apparently. I thought Visions was just excellent. Even the episodes where I didn't like as much, I thought were really creative and beautifully done. And it just felt like such a kind of natural thing for that series, which took so much from Japanese cinema, to kind of put it in the hands of like Japanese creatives and say, kind of take your culture and almost make it more prevalent than the sci-fi stuff in some of them. Like I love the samurai designs really thrown full throttle at the viewer. Yeah, it's just really terrific stuff.
Yeah, I think with it, one of the things about it being on streaming that's great as well is that they don't have to be a certain length. Like they're all over the map. Like some of them are, I think, less than 10 minutes. Some of them are like a lot longer, like 20 yards. That serves the stories really well. It means you don't have to stretch them out any longer than they need to be. And I mean, this came out around the same time as the Marvel What If show did. And I'm a much bigger, I like Star Wars, but I'm a bigger Marvel guy than a Star Wars guy. And I thought that show was fine, but the animation was so stiff because they were so desperate for them to look exactly like the people who this was supposed to be, for you to feel like it's set in the Marvel universe. And with this, it was coming out around the same time. It was like, do this, like if you're going to be exploring the multiverse, make it look interesting. And every one of these episodes looked completely different. And there were some excellent ones. The one with the twins on the Star Destroyer, that was great. That's by one of the best anime studios out there, who are called Trigger. And they made a film called Promare, which is one of my favorite anime films. This is now just me recommending anime films to Niall and to whoever else. So watch Promare, which is about sort of like queer sci-fi firemen, and watch and watch my other favorite episode was the sort of Astro Boy inspired one about the droid who was going to be a Jedi. And that was by a studio called Science Saru, who do some of my favorite movies of all time. Night is Short, Walk On Girl, which is about a drunk night in Kyoto with a couple of students. That's a great movie as well. If you like that show, check those movies out. Those are my recommendations. I hope they will change your mind about anime, because I know it's not for everybody, but also there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't fit the mold of what people think anime is.
Well, hands up for me first, because I always should preface, I'm not a big anime guy, but I do love Studio Ghibli.
Yeah,
so I've got that entry level.
Yeah, that's a very.
I'm not a monster. I love Totoro.
Yeah, no, fair. Everyone loves Totoro.
Definitely. Well, this all links quite well into our question of the week, which we'll go to now, which all ties into animation, especially because we are talking about an animated film today. So this is our chance to dive into some of our thoughts on the world of movies as a whole and find out a bit more about our guests. So today's question is, what makes animation such a great medium for storytelling, and is it taken seriously enough? Sam, probably a big question for a lecturer and animation buff like yourself. And I know with A Town Called Panic, I kind of said we were testing your DVD shelf with such a niche short choice. But
it's there. It's here. Yeah, it's right here.
So, but yeah, what are your kind of thoughts on, we talked there about the Oscars, and you said about it's the film that the grandchildren are watching, etc. There's that aspect of it, but then there's also, like you said, there's a lot of creative films like you get like Mitchells and the Machines, and as you were mentioning, Wolf Walkers, etc. Why do you think animation works so well in that sense?
I mean, at its best, the reason why animation works really well to tell certain kinds of stories is that it's not confined to what we see in the real world. It's very, very capable of expressing emotions in ways that go beyond performance, or that go beyond the performance of actors, for example. So, actually, a great example is the movie Flea, which so it's a documentary about. I'm bringing this up because it was in my lecture today, actually, so I'm just recycling material here. But the movie Flea is a documentary about a migrant trying to get from who over the course of several years goes from Afghanistan to Russia to Denmark, and because for various reasons, that person who is being interviewed, because it's a real person being interviewed, it is a documentary, they didn't want to be filmed for this, so animation is used to substitute for real life footage. And for the most part, that animation is not too dissimilar actually to what you see in What If. It's fairly like realistic, trying to make you feel like you're in the room with them, which is fine. But then where it really shines, and where I think it ties into the question that you've asked, is when it reaches points of heightened emotion. So for example, when he is being trafficked at one point, when he's being like crammed into this ship, and then I think they get caught and like the police boards, and they get packed off into a truck and sent off. And this is when he's a child. During these moments of heightened emotion, the animation style shifts and it becomes a lot more expressionistic. It becomes this like black and white charcoal style where everything looks a lot scarier and also a lot less defined. And that puts you in the mind of this character who's feeling frightened, who doesn't understand really what's happening to him, and who's reliving this traumatic memory in these interviews. And it's like, that's what animation is. That's animation's advantage as a storytelling medium, not necessarily in terms of narrative, in terms of getting the events of a story across, but in terms of expressing emotions that you wouldn't be able to express in the same way in live action film.
It's also a way, I guess, of when you think of like memories and stuff like that, sometimes you might sort of like kind of think of them in like almost dreamlike in a way. It's almost as if like animation can kind of, because so much of film is kind of like metaphors, a visual representation of certain emotions or feelings. And when you think back of like memories and stuff, you might not be thinking like you can remember it exactly. So when you do get more serious animation or adult animation, when I think of something like Anomalisa, it's something that's kind of like adding to the story with its, you know, visual elements. It's kind of using its style to kind of comment on the themes and simplicity that it's going for in its storytelling. That like when he's at the hotel and everything like that, and everything just kind of looks so miniature and perfect, and it kind of then makes you think like, yeah, I can imagine that feeling. You know, I've been to those locations, or I've, you know, been on a plane and everything like that. And there is something kind of like almost miniature, and everything is visually aesthetic, isn't it? Whereas when you just see something in live action, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that's just what it is. But it's animation can kind of give you what it feels like in a way, or what it kind of like seems like in your mind.
Yeah, and I mean, there's ways of doing that in live action, like for example, the German expressionist films, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That's all about crafting these really intricate, overtly manufactured sets in order to get across the emotional complexity of that story visually. But I mean, these days, I mean, so you can still do that with sets these days in a live action movie. If you're going to try and do that, you'd probably be using some kind of animated effect anyway, right? You'd probably be creating things with computers and adding, you know, filters on and stuff like that. Like animation still plays a part in the way that those kinds of things are sometimes done in quote unquote live action movies, because obviously there's so much crossover between animation and live action today. Yeah, but I mean, you can look at any movie. You can look at, well, apart from maybe Town Called Panic, but you can definitely look at you know, most animated movies. I think Anomalisa is another great example, and think, well, how is animation being used to tell the story in a way that you couldn't in live action? In Anomalisa, you've got, for example, the characters are stop motion puppets, and the main character over the course of the film slowly starts to realize that he is a stop motion puppet, and his body starts to like fall apart sometimes, and he like pulls off the face part of the puppet at one point. And another fascinating aspect of that film is that every character apart from the main character has the same voice, which is again trying to highlight his alienation and the fact that he sees himself as different and more special and more interesting to everybody around him. And then when he meets somebody with a different voice, the woman, Lisa, of the title, that is shocking to both him and the audience, because you've been immersed in this world where everyone is the same and they all have the same face. And again, it would be achievable in live action, just having one actor kind of green screened in playing every character. It wouldn't be as effective.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like with like something like The Father, isn't it? That they're able to play with sets and stuff like that. They can kind of like use the visual trickery in that way. But with animation, it's kind of just easier to do with that. It's very much like, oh, he's got dementia and Alzheimer's, that's why this is happening. Whereas animation, you can still use that when it's even just a normal circumstance. I know Craig definitely would sort of agree with the Anomalisa stuff, you know, from when even as soon as we saw that film, it was one that was highly rated by yourself, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, it was also just sort of a film that broke me, especially for the element that Sam talked about with regards to all of the characters and the voice, and just the way in which the moment he tries to critically sort of address Lisa, and then the sort of overlap of the voice actually starts to occur. So as if he was basically the one unique thing that he believed he found in his life, he basically tries to crush down until it's just like everything else. And that sort of realization is sort of devastating. But I was also just going to say that I think in terms of animation, what I really appreciate is that I think from a sort of character acting point of view, I think animation is incredibly useful in many situations, because I just think that there are ways in which you can make... I'm trying to think of the right way of saying this, but there are ways in which you want the body of your characters to necessarily look at times that in live action would just come off as weird, but in animation, because there's a degree of flexibility to it, you can make everything sort of look natural. I think a lot of this is on a sort of superficial level in terms of when we're talking about stories which aren't human, for example. I think there are ways in which you can sort of convey that a lot better than just say, pick example of live action and animal movie where it's just people dubbing the animals and just watching the animals sort of run around. I will pick good examples like Homeward Bound or Babe, and I'll pick bad examples like, say it with me, David,
Pudsey the dog, the movie.
Yeah, where basically you just don't get the same sort of connection, because you're expecting people to give up a sort of sense of belief in order to buy into the story in ways in animation that you can just naturally sell it as the way that this individual world just sort of works. And I think that's sort of quite useful. That's why I think, to sort of link this to Niall a little bit, and sort of some of the things I find interesting about live action Star Wars at the moment, some of the weird backlash we're getting about character designs who were originally established in like the animated universes now coming into play and just getting absolutely roasted. So like Cad Bane, Grand Inquisitor characters like that, because they were willing to sort of give up that element of realism for the animated, but because it didn't translate well over to live action, it just becomes jarring for people. And even though it didn't happen to the same extent, even with Ahsoka, I think some people were a little bit anxious, but then Rosario Dawson sort of proved them wrong. I think it's just why I think animation can be quite useful in that regard, but I also don't think that people see it as the same regard, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I guess sky's the limit with animation in some ways, isn't it? Now, what do you think of this question?
No, it's a really interesting one, and I've been thinking about it a lot recently, because it's been it's funny why you say that, like people are worried about characters from animation going to live action, and then you have a character as famous in live action as Luke Skywalker, and they kind of make him a cartoon in live action. So what's the distinction anymore?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it does show, and I find this really appealing in a way, is because when that Clone Wars show started all those years ago, it was like very disliked initially in that knee-jerk way most Star Wars things are. And then like over a decade later, it's so beloved that when they try to use these characters in live action, they're under so much scrutiny. And it could be the thing, it's just like a very loud minority online. But I think in this case, at least it's people who care so much about these characters' designs, they feel almost protective over them. And I know some like recasting worries them as well when they do that. But in animation, there's just so many of those ideas, especially in like a sci-fi setting, they can throw out there that can really like... I think that's what I love about animation. I think it democratizes creativity in so many ways. I was thinking while you were talking earlier, Dave, about the possibilities of the medium, is if you sat someone down who'd seen neither film and just told them to watch like Spider-Man No Way Home and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and asked them to like compare and contrast the superhero multiverse story, like I'd be pretty shocked if they found a live action version more entertaining. Because when we see clips of Spider-Verse and GIFs, you know, it's oh my god, there's so much going on, but it's so clear and beautiful. And then No Way Home, it's like just people, everyone's been joking about it on Twitter recently, it's just people against green screens, just kind of lit blandly. And it's fine, you know, I don't hate those films, I'm not trying to diss them, but I think it's telling that, you know, I'm close to 30 years old, and my favourite Spider-Man and Batman films are both animated. And they've done so many live action ones in my lifetime.
Are you a Mask of the Phantasm guy or a Lego Batman guy?
I'm a Phantasm guy. Phantasm for me.
Yeah. I think, Spider-Verse, I mean, on one hand, don't get me started on Spider-Man No Way Home, because I've got a lot of I think issues with that movie. I don't know. I think I might have. Like
Dave's
that movie.
Here, it's a powder keg.
I liked that movie, but I'm not sure. I think I like it less than anyone I've ever spoken to about it. On the other,
don't speak to David. Then.
Does David love it, or does David?
No. Like I was like one which when it came out, I was like, I think this is going to age badly, and I have a lot of issues with this. So now this is starting to happen. I'm like, they're like, yep, yeah, I said this would happen
like in a month.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a different podcast, but it's like, I don't think it will hold up because it doesn't work as a movie in its own right, because you watch the Spider-Man swinging and it's like, oh, it's three Spider-Men. If you don't already have pre-existing relationships with those characters, then what's going on here? Whereas if you watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, they make all of those Spider-Men, none of whom we've ever met before, completely visually distinct. Yeah. So you know what they're all about. You understand how and why they're different from one another. You gravitate towards certain ones, like the anime Spider-Girl, the Spider-Ham, the noir Spider-Man. They all look and move completely differently. They look like they've come from different universes. It works inherently because of the animation, not just by appealing to these other movies that they assume that we've seen. But it was a good movie, and I had a good time watching it, but I have my issues with it. I'm shaking my finger wildly for the listeners. Is what's happening there.
David, don't respond.
No, it's
just walk away.
But it just goes to show, like, I agree with the power of animation is what I was thinking. The same thing as Sam is that you can show those different multiverses through the animation. Same with Star Wars, as we've mentioned before, is that you can kind of show like different genres and different, like we were talking about Cad Bane. You know, he's like this kind of like Western style character, and it's like how can you translate that into live action as well, whereas in animation there's just something about it which is a bit more easier to kind of do and to sort of digest in that way. And it's almost, I kind of guess what you guys mentioned on Disniversity, Sam, is that with Disney it's the kind of storybook element, is that you kind of with animation sort of opened up into that immediately. People are like, they know what they're getting themselves into. If it's Spider-Verse, you're like, oh, this is it within a comic book. If it's like a stop motion, it's like, oh, this is kind of like some sort of like miniature world that I'm inside. So I think that there's kind of, whether it's adult sort of stories or whether it's children's stories, it takes you back to a simpler time, I think, in some ways as well. There's this kind of comfort with animation. So we've talked very much about like serious kind of stuff there, but I think obviously the film we're talking about today is very fun. But, you know, I think of things then as well, like, you know, Laker and Aardman and stuff like that, in which they're just fun and silly, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that there's also this idea that people are just like, oh, well, that's for kids. And it's like, why does that have to be for kids? Why can adults not just like want to have some, you know, a more chilled out time? As we mentioned, we were talking about on the episode with Italian Job, Craig, you know, it was our guest Luke was saying that they were watching this really depressing film about like assassination and terrorism and everything like that. And it's like, sometimes you just need to, you know, have something which is a bit more positive. You know, we've said about DreamWorks. I remember the other day I was kind of on a work trip, and I was like, oh, I just need something that's just kind of like really put in the background, just I don't need to pay much attention, but it's still kind of fun. And for some reason The Road to El Dorado is always a film I put on for that, because it's just there on Netflix, and I'm like, this is a fun film, this is, you know, kind of jolly, nice visuals and all that kind of stuff. I don't need to pay attention to what's going on. So there's kind of that comfort there, I think, with animation, and it's similar with stop motion and your kind of fun stories.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the amount of people I argue with about, if I happen to be ragging on a bad animated film that I've seen, I always get this response, and I'm pretty sure we've also had episodes of this podcast where people have tried to use this response of, it's just meant for kids, what does it matter if it's good or not? I'm just like, no. You can have genuinely good things aimed for kids, right? Stop trying to use this excuse of just, oh, kids will just watch any old shit. Like, I don't like that. I don't think it's respectful to kids. And just, I have the right to basically watch something and want to get something out of it. Like, just come on, just do good things that can be entertaining. Hence, what we'll soon be discussing.
So we'll now go on to today's film, which is A Town Called Panic, also known in French as Panique au Village. It was from 2009. And this is, its basic summary is cowboy and Indians only wish was to come up with a brilliant idea for Mr. Horse's birthday, but when their plan ends up in utter disaster, they'll need to travel the world and back to make things right again. And this is based off like a television show. Some people might know the visuals in the UK from like the Cravendale adverts and stuff. It's kind of like it's seeped into a lot of different parts of media. There's actually a few specials I think that they also did for this specific film, which kind of spawned from the series, and as evident in the alternate name, this, stems from France. You got directors Stéphane Aubier and Vincent Petard. They also worked on the script as well with Guillaume Malandrin. And then in terms of your cast, again, hopefully I'm not butchering any names here, you got Stéphane Aubier in a voice role as well. You got Gian Balebar, Nicolas Boissy, Francis de Brigode, Veronica Dumont, Bruce Ellison. So, yeah, very much. This is from France, French speaking. You can get it like subtitled. I think there is American versions or dubs of it. I saw that for some of the specials, and it just seemed wrong. I was like watching it, like, no, this shouldn't be a thing. You should watch it with the French. And as Craig mentioned at the top, possibly the first foreign film that we've talked about. And yeah, from 2009. And yeah, it's a kind of claymation stop motion which uses the kind of like cowboy Indian farmyards or toys that you would sort of see as a kid. So Sam, when I mentioned this one to you, you said, as we mentioned earlier, this was on the shelf, this was a DVD, it's in your sort of French section, I believe, which you have. So interested in how many other parts of the world are on that shelf. But
that's a hell of a question.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a question.
Yeah, what are your sort of main thoughts on this? Did you see it when it originally came out? Is this something that you've always kind of like gone back to? Or?
I have only watched it once before. I didn't see it when it initially came out in 2009, but probably not long afterwards during you can really chart my life in terms of DVD buy-in binges, and around that time, around kind of 2010, 11, which is also about when I went away to university and gained control of my own finances fully for the first time. I think what I did was I went on the Rotten Tomatoes list, what was then the Rotten Tomatoes list of 100 best animated features, and just over the course of a few months, bought all of the ones that I hadn't seen, and one of those was A Town Called Panic. And yeah, so I remember watching that in my first student house for the first time. And yeah, it's good fun, isn't it? I was going to say, because it doesn't do any of the things that we were saying animation does really well, because it doesn't really tell a story, and it doesn't really... I mean, it has characters, some of whom are very likable, but it's not really a movie about character. It's not about character development. It's just a series of random comedic events at its core, but that's something that animation also does really well and has done since the days of the Looney Tunes, etc. Bugs Bunny didn't need a plot or character development. He just caused chaos, and that is, as was said right up top, I think that is what this movie is about. But I mean, all animated movies are interesting for analysis to me, but it is very interesting in terms of the way that it uses stop motion and the kinds of techniques that it's employing, I think, and also interesting to think of it as an entry within the long history of the stop motion film.
Yeah, and it's interesting in terms of, again, of like most famous animated films, weird like animated films. Niall, I know when I mentioned this film to you, as we've sort of alluded to in your intro and the previous episodes, sometimes you like your kind of weird stuff. You don't like things to be too mainstream. And even when I was like, oh, it's a weird French animation, you were like, oh, Fantastic Planet. I was like, we're not going that weird. We're not going that deep. But yeah, had you ever had the experience of this? What was your sort of initial reactions?
Well, let me tell you what, Dave. This was the strangest episode of BoJack Horseman they've ever made. How does this fit in a series? No, this is weird because I think I had like a weird flashback when you said the name of this, and I realized I think I had seen like some of this when it was like a TV show. I think this played like once when I grew up in Ireland, and I was always like, what was that? That was really funny. And yeah, no, this is just a good, like, was it like 75 minutes of just sheer manic childlike energy, which is pretty excellent. I won't lie, today I got home after work, it'd been a really hot day. I definitely wasn't in the headspace for this. This was just so much to take in, but just so creative, and I like the fact it doesn't get bogged down too much with story or like greatly emotional details, you know, because I think that would be counterintuitive to the energy it's putting out there, because this feels like what the story a child would tell with these toys. You know, I think on the DVD box you had, Sam, it even said, a reviewer described it as Toy Story and Absinthe, which is pretty true, you know, and that's what I love about it. Even though it's so simple, it still throws in that thing like there's just a tiny love story, like the slightest thin slice, because a child would think like, oh yeah, Benny's gonna kiss the lady horse, and at the end, yeah, no, I had a very good time with this. Just very good natured.
I will say there's something about the horses dancing together and the way they were interlocked, which looked, I think, probably more intimate than they imagined it would. But
and when you said at the start, I think I've fallen in love, I was thinking with the lady horse.
Yeah.
Very, very charming character.
Okay, both emotionally and literally, I'm not going to go that deep.
What I love about the horse thing, though, is the fact that it's like Madame Langrier and all this, and then just horse. Like, she gets a name, but horse doesn't get a name.
Yeah, but if you only say the French pronunciation, it actually sounds like a cool name. I actually might name my child Cheval.
Very true.
Ah, mes amis, Cheval!
It's so annoying because all the characters speak French, like even with the silliest voice in it. It's like they still sound so beautiful. This doesn't. Also, am I wrong, or is this a Belgian film?
Yeah, it's Belgian French co-production. I think the directors are Belgian, so it is slightly out of place on my French shelf, and I have considered today possibly starting up a Belgian shelf, but there's a lot of crossover between those two countries.
I just want to give Belgium credit, because I'm actually like, I'm struggling to think, have I ever seen a Belgian film before? And I love world cinema. I was like, have I ever seen a film set in Belgium? Even Tintin's not.
Belgian movie. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna go on Letterboxd. What's the top? See, if you go on Letterboxd and you look at the top Belgian movies, it's all like, again, like co-productions that you might not necessarily think of as Belgian, like Titan, which I would think of as French.
Yeah, it's just something that's so like light and fun, and as you guys mentioned, something that seems like would be a story that would be invented by children. But I kind of saw it very much like in a kind of Robot Chicken way as well. Is this kind of like, it was almost for adults at the same time, not so much again like kids playing with toys, but kind of like adults going like, what if this goofy thing happens? What if this silly thing happens? Just because we're playing with toys and we're doing what we want with toys, and kind of using that as a way to make things funnier, like the silly expressions and the crazy people like falling out of places, and like when they're in the volcano and they're like, is Cowboy dead? And like for a moment I was like, is he dead? Like, I don't know, this film is so crazy. For a moment I thought that he could have just genuinely died, and they were just quite like blasé about it.
Me off guard and had me genuinely crying for a little bit, because I thought, this is a beautifully set up joke. I appreciate it so much. It's when the bricks all start arriving at the house and they're all panicking, and they get a phone call from Horse saying, yeah, I'm going to be a bit late. There seems to be lots of traffic, and it's just all the brick just driving past. I was just like, oh my God.
That's the same one that got me. I howled at that. When that it sounds so like simplistic, but as soon as that happened, I was like, rubs hands together, settling in for a treat.
Yeah. The only thing that annoyed me about that segment is that the number on the invoice is clearly not 50 million bricks. But even then,
many more bricks, yes.
Yeah. It's like, arguably it's 50 million more than 50 million based on the amount of zeros on that everlasting document.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of insanely clever, even though it's just absolutely insane, it's weirdly well thought out and well paced. I also remember laughing at like a variety of jokes, such as towards the end when the sort of tidal wave is heading towards the school, just seeing Simon go to the window and just go, "Oh, horses here." It's just like, what?
My biggest laugh, if we just listen biggest laughs, was when the very, very angry farmer absolutely demolished a gigantic slice of toast with Nutella on it.
I loved that farmer, just how angry he always was. And
he's the best character,
and
right?
when
He's
they're
furious.
doing like surgery on the tractor, that's the bit that got me, when it's like it's all in pieces and they're like dude, you know, with all the like pigs and sheep and stuff like that. It's crazy how angry that guy gets. And again, I think that's why I said earlier that like the voice cast then I think really do bring it to life. And I think there's something that you lose when you have like the American aspect of it, whether that's just because I don't understand French, so there's kind of like a, you know, charm to it in the sense of like, oh, it's like gobbledygook, which somebody could take offense at kind of thing. But I think even if you do, it's the same, I suppose, with British cinema, or, you know, if there's like an accent there, then it, you know, it can add to the charm of something, which I think that, you know, a lot of French media does play up.
So I'll tell you what, right off the bat, I was thinking about that because I was watching some episodes of the TV show and they did dub that in English. I don't think they ever dubbed the movie, but the TV show they dubbed for British TV with English actors, one of whom was Alexander Armstrong, Pointless's own, plays the horse. And he did. I thought it would have been very funny if he did it in his own posh voice, but he does it in a sort of like a very kind of northern, I don't know, indistinct northern working class accent. It was kind of funny. The cowboy Scouse though, which I thought was hilarious, but the Indian has this very high-pitched, shrill, like American accent, and now I was watching thinking, I don't think I like this very much, even though he's got a high-pitched, shrill voice, as do most of the characters in the French version. I don't know, I don't think I like this in English. I prefer when it just sounds like gibberish because I don't understand French very well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, again, even though I had subtitles, and I think when Paul talked about it in the last episode, he was like, oh, you know, it is subtitled, but it's such a loose story, you don't even really need to sort of read them in a way. And I was kind of like, throughout the film, I was like, well, no, there is a lot more dialogue here than you would get maybe in certain other animated films, like WALL-E or something like that, in which, again, there's not a reliance on dialogue for a lot of that film. But I was kind of like, you would miss an aspect of this with the names and everything like that if you weren't paying attention to it. But I think it still does work in the sense of like story-wise, you could still understand what was going on if you weren't reading or listening to what was happening.
I'm just going to say this out right now. Anyone who opts to watch that film in anything but French, you need to go. I just think that the speed is something that can only be maintained in French. I think there's something that I think every different language has some element of comic timing that they do really well, and I think for French it's just I think it's just sort of like the free flowing, because like there's not very many harsh consonants, so
yeah, lots of words ending in vowels that just flow
ending
right
with vowel
there.
they just keep going, so you basically get a really nice sort of sounding effect. And I think that's why they're able to get like such quick pacing, and that's why then they translate that into a lot of... That's why I described it as slapstick, right? Because you have all of that dialogue sort of flying around, and then the way they have the figures obviously just sort of up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then just the fact that they often have to use a lot of flash stars and just characters slamming into walls. Like the amount... Like when we get to the scientists and what the scientists are able to do, they're just hulking like horse around at one point, and I was like, how?
That's what I love when you look at the story, is that you look at it like, oh yeah, it's Horse's birthday and it's all this kind of simple stuff, and you, as you guys were saying, it gets a bit more mad when you get the delivery vans, and I was kind of loving that stuff. But I was there at one point like, how long are we going to spend in the town or like at the house? How long are we going to be there with this scattered bricks everywhere, and how many times we're going to see them try to construct it? But then when they go on this adventure, you know, you just read it and it's just like, you know, they find themselves in the middle of a tundra. While wandering throughout, they are sucked into a giant penguin robot that has been used by comprehensible, super strong scientists to make and throw giant snowballs. They catch up with Jared, but they are subsequently captured and put to work by the scientists. And then it's like, after that, it's like, oh, they find themselves underwater. And then they're in like a shopping center underwater. It's like, it's so ludicrous and so crazy, the places they go to. But it shows the inventiveness of the animation, I suppose, with the delivery trucks, the fact that they were like, you know, heightening themselves to like put all the bricks on top of each other. And you get that later on when it's like the penguin, just the way that it kind of like bends slightly with the fin, and in that like little shopping center thing, it's just the little like details you get with the animation. I love the fact as well, it's like, especially I think it's like the wife of the farmer, it's kind of when you are a kid, you know, you can't move toys, certain ones, so if their like arm is on their shoulder, that's just how they are the entire time, that they're just waddling around like that. That's what I love about something like this, is that they're kind of, it's improved by what they're restrained by.
Yeah, they are kind of gesturing to the limitations of actually playing with those toys. It's, you know, you were mentioning the Lego movie earlier, Niall, and it is very similar to that. And that also has the energy of like, this is just the story. Well, literally in that movie, this is the story that a child is telling, playing with his Legos. And the Lego movie has a low frame rate, and that's a deliberate decision to evoke stop motion Lego films. A lot of people probably think the Lego movie is stop motion if they just saw little bits of it. But obviously stop motion Lego films made by fans or even by kids have been a big thing for a long time. And they were very deliberately trying to tap into that. Stop motion as a medium of animation has a lower bar for entry than anything else. It's might be difficult to make great stop motion, but anyone can make some stop motion. All you need is a camera and some objects. You don't need to be an amazing artist like you would be for hand-drawn animation, or to have high-tech equipment that you would need for software that you would need for computer animation. You just need a camera and some toys. Kids can do it. So I think that makes it very easy for movies like this to tap into that childlike sense of play, of anything can happen with these figures, and to lean into limitations of that. Again, like they do in the Lego movie, they only move their arms in ways that a Lego figure could. That's an important part of maintaining that aesthetic. Because these figures, I was trying to figure out how they made this, and I said I couldn't find any footage of them making it, but it seems to be what you call replacement animation, which is when, rather than moving the figures, they have 100 figures that are only, thousands of figures realistically in different poses, and they just swap them in. And usually on a bigger budget film, something like Coraline on Nightmare Before Christmas even, they use replacement animation in tandem with posable figures, usually for the faces. So the bodies can move, like Chicken Run's a famous example. The bodies are made from clay, the heads are not, and they have to be attached to the bodies, and that's why they all wear scarves or something around their neck to cover up the seams. And that's because with replacement animation, you can get a lot more detail in terms of expression, in a way that you couldn't just by moving like Wallace's face around. You can have characters like Coraline or like Jack Skellington who are really, really expressive, because you don't need to move the faces, you just swap the heads in. That's not what they're doing in Town Called Panic. These characters aren't very expressive. You can barely see their faces. They don't even really need to have faces for this story to work. They're just doing it to maintain this sense that it's a child playing with these little toys.
And again, I think, going back to I joked about like horse with the name and stuff like that. And it's the details that they put into the comedy there as well. Like when they're in the volcano, I love that like he goes on the phone, and it kind of goes back to like similar stories as well, of when it's like something chaotic, but there's something simple at its core. So just the fact that he wants to get back to this music lesson, she's like, oh, are you coming? And he's literally there like hanging off a volcano, and he's like, yes, I will be there soon. I've just got a bit held up. And you're like, you got held up by being in a volcano trying to like chase some like sea creatures. It's just, yeah.
Or like they're in the house of the mer people, which is also their house that the mer people have stolen. And then the phone rings and they pick it up, and it's like, hello, oh, it's for Horse.
Yeah.
Is Horse here? It's like, obviously, yes, he's the one that's a horse. I think it's very crucial that, so amongst all this chaos, you've obviously got nods to real life relationships but I think it's crucial that that's entirely through the horse. It's not the cowboy and the Indian, the human characters who are having these real life relationship adventures, this romantic comedy thing going on. It's the horse. It's the one that's an animal, and that means that in itself becomes inherently ridiculous, and it's almost a child's idea of what like dating is. It's just two horses and they dance together, and one of them's a music teacher, and the other one's always late to his piano lessons. I do think we'll have to mention as well, though, Indian. I'm not a huge fan of that. We've said it a number of times. What it is a small toy of a Native American chief caricature. The character's name is literally Indian. There's no other way we could refer to it unless we said it like on the on in the French, which is it's still the same. It's still drawn from the same place. I know why they didn't call the character Native American. It doesn't flow off the tongue as well. But yeah, I don't know. Does that totally sit right? I guess it's because it's toys. This is not representing a real Native American person, which is why something like Disney's Peter Pan is so offensive, because these people are being presented as Native American people, and this is what they look like, and this is how they behave. Here, the fact that they're a cowboy and Indian is completely incidental to anything that's going on. It's got nothing to do with anything. The idea is just these are the toys that a child might have. But yeah, it's still the number of times I'm going to have to say the word Indian over the course of this podcast in that context is it doesn't sit perfectly well on my tongue. So I thought it was something I would just mention.
I mean, for me, it was I did have that sort of concern as well, but at the point where various members of the town basically just have names which are just like various professions, I think at the point where it's very clear that, at the point where cowboy and I sort of call them Indienne because obviously we see the name written down, and because it's in the French it's ENE, so I'm just like I pronounce it like that to sort of get away from that. I completely understand where you're coming from. I think there's just sort of two things I would say that's why I'm able to shrug it off in this context. One, as you say, they don't play up any sort of negative stereotypes. I think there's a very clear sound that people think of when we think of Native Americans, that had we heard that sound, probably would be like, ooh, yeah, this is going into...
different story. Yeah. They don't do any of that. They don't, like, smoke the peace pipe or, like, scalp anybody or anything. It's completely divorced from any stereotypes and any sense of reality. Yeah. It's just a figure that is playing this role, and that's what it happens to look like. The
closest you could get to it being uncomfortable is if you were to imagine is just these two characters are essentially children and they just dressed up that's about the most uncomfortable, but even then I also just think the second thing is that it's the sort of thing of I look at it as just product at the time. I think at the point where it's just we've learned a lot since then. I think so long as we're not current day making things like that sort of play on that, I can deal with it a lot more.
It wouldn't get made, would it? I think it's 13 years old, which doesn't feel like a very long time, but you know, the ways in which we have these conversations about race and stereotypes and representation has genuinely changed a lot, at least in like the mainstream world in the last 13 years in particular.
Yeah, so, it's a social media impact, right? At the point where we've had that rise.
Part of it, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that was something that was sort of at my mind, but I think... And it's probably as well because all the other characters are postmen, policemen. They're not specific, like actual...
the whole village people.
Yeah. But I love the fact that like policemen like had like an entire CCTV setup of like the entire world or something like that. He was like, where's horse gone? And he's got all these missing posters and like you can see everything.
The police state,
man.
You get arrested, you go to jail for the suspicion of kidnap.
And that prison can be set up anywhere because he just builds that prison out of nowhere on top of all of the bricks.
Yeah.
I was like...
Yeah. And in the day, they could have lived in that. They didn't need to go through the whole building a new house plot. You've got a portable prison. It's not ideal, but it's something for now. I don't know why I'm trying to pick plot holes in this movie.
I mean, if we're going to go into plot holes, I mean...
Like
the whole plot is about a hole, isn't it?
Wait.
You guys said earlier though, it was just like, oh, you know, there's not too much of a story, that nothing changes by the end, nobody's going through character progression. I was like, actually, you know, Horse couldn't play piano, and by the end, that shot of him like playing the piano in the way with his hooves and like playing it expertly, I just loved that. I was like, what a journey
David,
we've gone on through this film.
Did you not notice that he was clearly playing along to a recording?
Exactly, yeah, when he stopped, but I was kind of like, there's still some progression here. He's still like, you know, before he was kind of nervous on it, he at least looked confident, even though he wasn't doing it himself.
Did you skip over the fact he found love?
Yeah.
You focused on him playing piano?
And his car was fixed. I love the fact that horses are driving cars, and that's not even like, you know, questioned at all. But Niall, was there any other sort of funny moments or goofy moments that you were just like, what the hell is this?
Well, I think the first thing that made me like severely crack up, and you guys did mention it, is the farmer who's always shouting. I don't know why, but that taps into something like very feral in my mind that I just find absolutely hilarious. And I saw the reviews picked him out specifically for his performance. Apparently he's quite a well-known Belgian comedian who played him. And also just the whole conceit of the farmer rigging. And they live one house over there, the only two houses in this town, to ask, can you pick...
It's not really a town, is it?
Can you pick my animals up from music class? And I was like, all right, I'm on another level. I've got to just let this film wash over me. That stuff really stuck out. I think as it went on, though, it's kind of what I was talking about. I started to find the pace of it like just slightly exhausting with where I was. So by the time they're underwater with those people, I was just kind of unfazed.
Yeah.
Almost the wackiness, I think it plateaued. So just like, all right.
I think that's it. If we are talking about like reviewing this movie, I think that might be my one criticism, is that at 75 minutes, I wouldn't say it dragged, but like the madness does start to, like in the middle-ish, somewhere between the penguin and the giant slice of Nutella toast. I feel like there's a bit of like, oh, this is about as mad as it gets, and it's like you say, plateaued. And then that kind of happens at the end where we get a Return of the King style, like 4 different epilogues thing going on, which you didn't necessarily need. But when it's happening, it's happening. I have a question I wanted to pose to you guys. This is something that I've been wrestling with in my mind, like in my lectures and in my writing for a while, and that I'm trying to figure out. Stop motion and like rural countryside settings. What's that about? What's that connection, do you think? Can you think of any other, this has now become a lecture, can you think of any other stop motion films or shows in these similar like rural countryside farm settings?
Well, Wallace and Gromit is almost like that, definitely. And
Is Postman Pat?
Yes,
Postman Pat.
Yeah.
Even like
Chicken Run is obviously set on a farm.
Lake almost does, even though they haven't done like farm, even like where some of their stuff like Missing Link and Kubo, there's still a kind of like they're in like villages that have like a little farm, or they go somewhere which is kind of like
like rural, like forest environments.
I know there was a TV show my parents watched growing up that was like stop motion. Trumpton or something like that?
Yeah.
Trumpton, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Noddy and stuff like that. There is something kind of like, I think Postman Pat especially, like there's ones which you hear the songs to and I'm like instantly brought back. There's something about Postman Pat which is like just like ingrained in my, like, I'm like, as soon as I hear it, I'm like, oh my God. I think it's because they also had those like little moving cars in shops and stuff. I suppose, does that come from, again, this idea of the farm toys? Like, is it because that was such a thing of like having the little play sets of pigs and cows and that kind of stuff? Does it stem from there, I suppose, as an easy prop? But also it kind of goes back to the model railway aspect of like little trees and I mean, Thomas, as I always say, Thomas, it's that's a live action like model railway is what that is. But there's elements of stop motion sometimes with the Fat Controller and stuff like that. But it's the same, especially to a child. It's the same aesthetic. It's a 3-dimensional object, you know. So yeah, so that's perhaps one explanation. David, any other guesses as to why that might be?
Maybe it predates even like the farmyard playset thing, but for like kind of marketing things, and I'll say like these things are mostly aimed at children almost exclusively, is that, you know, like the rural countryside is a much more appealing place to show a child than like something set in suburbia or a city. Of that, like especially really young kids, they want to see like cute, fluffy animals and just like idyllic countryside. What would you say? Like villages?
Yeah,
that just look lovely.
Like Watership
you know?
Down. That's a good example of that.
Yeah, wonderful and idyllic. I think it's worth noting that almost all of these examples have been British, and I think in this country, and possibly in other Western European countries like France and Belgium, but definitely in this country, there's a sense of idealism around certain segments of the population with regards to like rural Britain and the countryside, and I think that might tie in with this sense of nostalgia that seems to be evoked by these toy-like animations. But I always wonder if it's something to do with the fact that stop motion seems to be like, maybe it's got a reputation as a more organic, like a more artisanal form of animation that seems to be linked to the simplicity of like country and rural life. There's a McDonald's advert that I show in my classes from a few years ago that you might remember, of lots of not too dissimilar from Town Called Panic, lots of stop motion little figures constructing a Happy Meal, like the giant Happy Meal, and they're in like a farm environment. And the point behind that is it's because all of our ingredients are organic. Our carrots come from farms. Our beef comes from farms. And I wonder if that's...
Well, they use this for Cravendale.
Yeah, exactly. So they're using stop motion to evoke that sense of like, this is organic, this is real, this is homemade, it's homegrown almost. That's something I'm grasping towards this idea.
I always think with puppetry there's a similarity with stop motion as well. There's the kind of thing of like, people don't like it or don't take it seriously. It's kind of very much a specific art form. Some people might get creeped out by it even. But with like puppetry, if you're not looking at like the Muppet side, but still Jim Henson, there's always kind of like fantasy is a big thing when you look at like, Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. And then even when we were kids, there was those weird, I can't remember what they were some sort of like troll kind of things, and that was some sort of fantasy world. It was on like CITV or something like that.
Arthur and the Rotten Trolls?
Might have been, yeah. There was something, yeah, they were like in medieval
Someone
times
in the Rotten Trolls.
Yeah. Like,
Google
so
that.
Am I the only one who's got a relatively cynical answer for why I think the stop motion tends to be countryside?
I'll go on.
My cynical answer is because it requires so much attention to detail to get certain things. They want a less crowded environment, so doing cities just seems hustle and bustle. Yeah, in the back, it's more active things going on in the background as opposed to rural where you can have everything widely spread out apart. That's my cynical answer.
Okay. Shaun the Sheep, the TV show, all on a farm. Shaun the Sheep, the movie, they go to a city and there's a lot more characters. Roger and the Rotten Trolls. I've Googled it.
I mean, there's so much about this film that I love. I love how they're able to just... After the house has been destroyed, I love how they're able to just recreate furniture by essentially blowing it up. I just love how distracted Cowboy and Indiana in terms of just they're constantly wanting to play table tennis and just times where they're just playing card games constantly. I want to know what the scientists are up to. Like, why were they... Yeah, I want to watch more of these things. I just want to know more about this world because I find it a really fascinating world.
I also love, the moment where they dress up as Santa when we're talking about
I love that. It's like, unfortunately, your present fell down the hole. Oh, we'll go get it. And they just roll a massive rock on top.
And the fact they believe that just Santa is a horse.
I'm not going to lie, I've had a bit of a hard week, and this was 75 minutes of pure joy and happiness that I've been waiting to get. And I cannot fault this film. I know, obviously, in terms of whether or not this is like in terms of how we would weigh films, and like I follow the sort of Matt Stone and Trey Parker philosophy of storytelling, which is that every action should have some necessary consequence of like which creates a therefore or a but, and this is just and then. But it's one of the most charming pieces of media I've come across in a long time. There's a lot more heart and soul put into this than a lot of things I could talk to you. Obviously, we've talked about some great animated films and great great projects that people have genuinely cared about, but they're not the sort of things that are sort of thrust in my face on a regular basis. I am subjected to a lot of crap, frankly. And I'm not going to lie, this podcast is often subject to some of that. So this film was just pure madness and joy. It's the only time I've watched a film and I'm going, what the hell is going on? But I'm doing it whilst I'm trying to stop laughing. I cannot say anything bad about this film, even though I think that there are things to be said about this film. All right, so rewind those tapes and play them again, because we're now in VHS Corner. This week, and I think we've sort of agreed that this film is incredibly niche, so let's see how niche we can get in terms of its facts. So this week, Niall is going to be talking us through some of the facts that I say some of the facts, probably all of the facts he was able to find about this film based on the discussion we were having beforehand, but I'll hand over to Niall now. So what sort of things did you find out about this film that might interest us?
These were really hard to find, so I was kind of crapping myself for the last, however we've been recording that. Some of you guys might just reveal these things by accident. I don't know how niche they are as facts, but I think I did okay. So my first fact is the Town Called Panic franchise. It started off as a 4-minute short film in 1991 before becoming a TV show a whopping, how long is that? 11 years later, in 2002, which lasted 1 year. And then, as you said, it came over to British shores, where it was dubbed by Aardman. They put the work into it, so there's a cool little stop motion connection there. And yeah, of course, and this film then came out in 2009. So there was a lot. This thing was a thing for a long time before this movie, which I just think is crazy.
Animation takes a long time.
1991.
Gotta make all those toys.
And the two creators of it, they must just love this world so much that they love dipping back into it so often. And so yeah, some filmmaking facts. So the film took 260 days to make, which again, animation takes time. And I think you were wondering earlier, Sam, about how many figures they went through. So the film went through 1,500 plastic figures overall, which I guess you were guessing thousands for maybe one character, but I think for maybe they purposely use silly poses that don't quite make sense for their animation style.
Yeah, that's true. They'll probably reuse a lot of them. If you went through it, you'd be able to probably count each individual. If you could be bothered, you could go through it and count each individual one. There's some very distinct ones, like when there's a bit where the horse is inhaling to do a big blow and his stomach inflates. I'm like, oh, that's a very bespoke figure they've made for that moment. But yeah, most of them are just kind of generic, pointing and screaming and poses like that.
Some characters very clearly have a lot less poses than others. It's quite funny. I think especially the farmer's wife is very rigid, as Dave said. Yeah, and my final fact, and this one I really like, it was the first stop-motion feature film to be screened at the Cannes Film Festival.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, God, pull your finger out, Cannes. That's terrible. Amazing stop-motion films came out before 2009. Come on, man.
That is crazy. And the Cannes Film Festival, of course, where Shrek and Shrek 2 competed for the Palme d'Or the years they came out, which is
exactly, yeah,
a deranged.
I think Shark Tale premiered at Cannes as well. I don't know if it competed, but I'm pretty sure it premiered there. I think even possibly the B movie might have. I've got visions of Jerry Seinfeld in a giant bee costume flying into Cannes, although that might have been somewhere else.
So yeah, those are my facts.
I love the fact that this is essentially 30 years old, because Craig has talked how much he loves this film, but he recently, happy birthday Craig, has celebrated his 30th birthday, and Paul rightfully and fittingly put a picture from A Town Called Panic with Horse's birthday cake when he put his Facebook happy birthday post on Facebook. So
that has become less appealing at the point where I learn in the film that's not a cake, that's chocolate covered hay.
Oh right.
It's a bundle of hay that they put chocolate and candles on. So I also thought it was a cake, and I was like, oh, that's quite fun. And I'm like, oh.
Well, the sad thing is, when I learned it was hay, I was still like, yeah, but it still looks kind of tasty.
Yeah.
I'd probably give it a go.
Another part of animation again, isn't it? Like when things look really tasty in animation.
Yeah.
I was going to say, they had a barbecue. I don't know what they ate. I really want to know what they actually cooked.
That leads us then to our final point, which we're talking about the legacy of this movie and, what we thought of it. So does A Town Called Panic deserve to be remembered for all time and gain the honour of a place in our movie vault? Sam, I'll go to you first as the animation guru. What do you think? Like you said, you saw this on an IMDb list. I've seen it definitely on a few like animation must-watch lists and even like weird animation lists as well.
Yeah, I think it's a unique movie, and for that reason alone, it should be in there. Let alone the fact that it is very entertaining. And I mean, so there's no French films, no foreign language films in the vault. I think it's got to go in on that.
There is
basis.
one foreign language film in the vault, but it was never officially discussed fully on the show.
Oh, what would that
Parasite is in the film.
Oh,
vault,
fair enough. Okay, Parasite in Town Called Panic. That's all you need.
Wait a second. Is Gamera
versus
Gaius not in the vault? Did that get retconned? I thought.
Oh yeah, that's true. Okay, we have discussed a series of Japanese films.
Okay, well, still, Town Called Panic is the first stop motion film in the vault.
Niall, what do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking really hard about this before because I really enjoyed this film, but I fell into that trap of, but is it like the best stop motion film that could go in, or all these weird questions, and then I realized like thinking that deeply is not in the spirit of the film. So if I see the movie vault as this giant hole in the ground, this movie would just jump in it, guns blazing. And I think that's the way, we should get it in there.
I think it is safe to say we will never get another film like this as long as we live. And I think on that basis, it's got to go in, because I think it's going to be a one-of-a-kind film.
And Toy Story's in there, and if you want to see Toy Story and absinthe, then you could, like put a bottle of absinthe next to it. But also, I like the idea of, again, how we came to this film is just have the Dark Knight in there, and then next to it is A Town Called Panic. Maybe that's how you can come around your Belgian-French thing, Sam. You can just put it next to the Dark Knight on a separate shelf. Films about chaos.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. So yeah, it's not the best stop motion film that could be in there. I'm looking at one of my many letterboxd lists, which is every stop motion movie I've ever seen ranked, and Town Called Panic is 20th. And I like this movie. There's 19 better stop motion films, in my opinion. So I think you should watch each of those in succession, and that should be what this podcast is now.
Are you basically trying to turn this podcast into like a different offshoot of the format of Disniversity?
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. It definitely is kind of indicative of like animation in some ways or forms, and it definitely deserves its place in different lists for like how you can show how animation can work in different mediums, but also I suppose like a good example of an adaptation as well, if it's coming from television, of people come into it through the film. So yeah, into the movie vault goes A Town Called Panic, another fun and crazy film from 2009, which now leads us to our final part of the show, which is our endgame. So over to Craig.
We're in the endgame now.
Endgame time. Before I tell you what this game is going to be, I would just like to introduce a returning guest. There's somebody very close to the podcast, but they've not been around for a while. I think the circumstances, going on in the world sort of explain. But I would very much like to reintroduce to Well Good Movies our mascot, Swiss Lodge. Way! He's back.
And ironically, Sam mentioned the Playmobil movie earlier, and he has links to the Playmobil movie.
Yeah, so because of a convoluted detail that we discovered because of the Playmobil movie, it turns out that this dinosaur was once me. Anyway, enough about Swiss Lodge, or really, because this game is actually called Journey to Swiss Lodge. What we thought we would do is, because we've just had an incredibly chaotic animated film, and we have two people here who in different ways have had a variety of experience with animated films, we want to see what kind of madness you can come up with if you were given the script for an animated movie. And Sam, this is a bad time for you to have said earlier, I'm not a good writer. Basically, what we're going to do is this. I have devised a couple of little details. These aren't anything concrete. These are details that I'm going to give you, and I want you to give me a premise for an animated film. The film is called Journey to Swiss Lodge. The main character is our mascot, the dinosaur Swiss Lodge. So basically, we'll give you 90 seconds to come up with the pitch, and the basis of it is going to be as follows. David and I will listen to the pitches, and whichever one that we generally think is the more entertaining premise, the one that we think has a deeper story potentially, or the film that we think, for whatever reason you tell us we should to value more, is the one that will win. However, I'm going to slip in a few caveats that I'm not going to tell you, so I need you to sort of think about my mindset of if you do certain things a certain way, we might deduct metaphorical points off of you. So, for example, I'll give you the characters we would like you to include in the list to begin with. So Swiss Lodge should have a best friend who is a raccoon, and you get to name the raccoon. They should have a love interest, who you can decide who they should be, name, species, and all. And a rival called Trenton. Again, you can decide how this should play into it. And then, I'll write all of these details down so they'll be in the chat for you. Throughout this journey to Swiss Lodge, they should go through at least 3 settings. Those settings are a city, a volcanic area, and a medieval town. And you can decide whatever order they encounter, and then the ending could be wherever you want it to be. It could be in one of those places, it could be somewhere else. It's completely up to you. And finally, the villain should be named after somebody in this call, and their plot should be called The Zoom. Whatever you think their plot will be, again, is up to you. Okay, do you need me to repeat any of these details, or I can just put them...
I'm good. I've made notes.
Can I just get one detail, because I'm a bit behind the podcast lore. Is this starring the character Swiss Lodge?
So the main character is Swiss Lodge, this dinosaur.
Okay.
Yeah.
Behind the podcast lore, which like the lore behind this character probably hasn't existed since like early days. It's very much a the return.
Yeah. So, while they start to think, David, as usual, and by that I mean as per the last couple of episodes, they'll be playing for the opportunity to choose which film will be discussed in next week's episode. So it will either be my choice, your choice, or a choice of their own. So, just to give them an idea to see whether they want to choose one of our choices, tell us a little bit about your film without revealing what the film is.
Yeah, it's this is definitely one that we've been talking about animation, and we're talking about like toys and everything like that. So this is one that's definitely been brought up. It's very much one that is close to my heart for sort of growing up with this kind of media and toys, and it's just so much fun, so much zaniness, and it's to the little details of like showing characters with like cracks and scratches and that kind of stuff, and played by fantastic comedians as well. So yeah, my film is from 2014, and I think it sort of ties in well to what we've been talking about.
As for me, my film is from 2017, and what I decided to choose for my film is that we have an incredibly chaotic story with not much grounded plot around the idea of somebody's birthday. So I wanted to take a film that explores a similar premise, so a film based around a birthday, but look at it at a more darker, sinister sense in terms of the type of stories you can get around somebody's birthday. And also just a little bit more of a tense building plot. So David's actually going to be surprised by this, but I've actually chosen something which is slightly more horror-y themed. So, you have 90 seconds remaining. We are now going to play the countdown timer. And that is the time. So...
It's so weird hearing that go for so long. I think that's the longest countdown one I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's the longest one you're likely to as well. That's a website I regularly use to play Countdown online, and it goes up to 90 seconds. So, to determine whose pitch that we hear first, just so that we have the idea of fairness, that we're not just going to randomly pick. So, David, I'm going to let you decide who has odds and who has evens.
I'll give evens to Sam and odds to Niall.
Okay, so if it's evens, Sam, you go first. If it's odd, Niall, you go first. Are you ready? It's 1. So that means, Niall, we get to hear your pitch for the film Journey to Swiss Lodge first.
Okay, and am I timed for the pitch?
I was just about to bring this up. I'm going to give you...
Because there's a lot to get in there.
I think, given we gave you about 2 minutes to come up with the pitch, I'm going to give you 3 minutes max.
Okay, that's fair.
So your time starts when you say the first word.
Okay, so the year is 1986. We're in the city of Zurich, in a Swiss bank known as the Swiss Lodge, where in a vault, being opened after many years, they discover a dinosaur egg. The dinosaur hatches, and the bank decides to raise him as their own, naming him after the bank, Swiss Lodge. Cut to modern day. Swiss Lodge is a successful dinosaur banker, but the bank is under threat by the evil Craig Cheval, an evil banker who made most of his money through crooked podcast deals. Craig Cheval has invented a Zoom, a device to travel through time to steal artifacts to become even richer and eventually take over Zurich. But the intrepid Swiss Lodge is sucked into a time travel adventure, along with his best friend, the bodybuilding raccoon Chad Armstrong, and Lysandra, his human love interest, which is really weird. Chasing him is his rival Trenton, a dinosaur hunter who wants to sell Swiss Lodge to an American museum. So they travel through Pompeii, as the volcanoes are erupting. They end up in medieval England during the Black Plague, and eventually they face the evil Craig Cheval on his moon base in the far future, full of his stolen goods. Can Swiss Lodge and friends defeat him? Tune in to Journey to Swiss Lodge to find out. That's my pitch.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm gonna...
See, what you did there, which was very impressive and which eluded me, was come up with a way that Swiss Lodge could be both a dinosaur and a place to which one could journey.
Yeah. Clever.
Okay, so we have one about, I think, the only time somebody's going to cheer for a banker in a film. Fantastic. Okay, Sam, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine doesn't involve time travel. The medieval town and the city are just adjacent to one another, and there's no explanation.
Sure.
So Swiss Lodge, who was a dinosaur, grew up in the medieval town, and all he ever wanted to do was be a chef in a fancy restaurant, ladies and gentlemen. And he travels to the big city, the city of Paris, indeed, in order to achieve that goal. And he gets a job working in the greatest restaurant in all of Paris, but he can't actually cook. So his friend, a raccoon, lives under his chef's hat, and actually the raccoon is the one who's a really good chef, and he helps the dinosaur cook the food. The raccoon is called Ratatouille, is the name of the raccoon. Yeah. In the restaurant is another dinosaur chef who is called Trenton, who is both his rival and love interest. And she's also she's an even better chef than him. But obviously sexual tension flares up whenever they compete. Swiss Lodge hears word of something going down at a nearby volcano. A Zoom, indeed. A Zoom where an evil animation lecturer, myself, is giving an online lecture from his volcanic base, whereby he's analysing the movie Journey to Swiss Lodge and explaining why it's just a blatant rip-off of the movie Ratatouille. And Swiss Lodge, the dinosaur, isn't happy about this, so he goes to the volcano in order to put a stop to it, to stop it happening, to show up and explain why actually his story is a completely original one, because he's a dinosaur and the guy in Ratatouille wasn't a dinosaur, he was a man, and he's got a raccoon under his hat. But then obviously he gets captured in the volcano. He's going to be there. In fact, Sam is going to dissect him live in the Zoom to show how even his innards. And what? No, that doesn't make any sense. There's going to be an autopsy on the Zoom. I don't know why. And obviously, Ratatouille, the raccoon, and Trenton, the attractive dinosaur chef, have to journey to Swiss Lodge because he's being held in the volcano. There's two separate journey narratives. All the Pixar movies, all the big ones, have like journey quest narratives. We've got to get from A to B. This does it twice. So it's twice as good as Finding Nemo. Because they do it, they go there, and then we'll see some other people go there again in an eerily similar journey.
It's Finding Nemo and Finding Dory.
Yes, and Ratatouille.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sam. So I'm not gonna lie. The moment I heard the raccoon under the hat, I was like, I'm pretty sure I can guess what this guy's name is going to be, and lo and behold, Raccoon Turi. Okay, so what I really liked about that is that for a while I was just like, has Sam really just given up on this game and it's just, screw it, I'm going to give the plot of Ratatouille.
It's possible you wouldn't notice.
Yeah, but then the fact you basically turned around and turned this into a metatextual element, I thought, okay, there we go. I think that's quite clever. So before we go into my secret rules that neither of them were told, David, what did you think of the pitches?
Yeah, they were so both different. Like, I want Niall's, like, I would love that as the origin of Swiss Lodge, like, of the mascot. Like, he's a banker, like, they found this dinosaur egg. I think it's just such a fun, like, story. I love the villain, like, what's his name? Craig Cheval? It's just, yeah, it's so elaborate and fun. There's just so many, like, fun details in there. But yeah, it's also the fun meta stuff with Sam's as well. I can imagine it as like that moment in the film of like, what you're watching and then like, oh wait, what? And then it's like, I can imagine you just like, they come into this cave expecting this villain and then it's just you there watching TV, like on one armchair and like a small television, making notes of what they're watching.
Do you know what it makes me think of? You know the scene in Spaceballs where they put on the scene for Spaceballs and they're doing the turning back and forth? I just imagine that's the scene of Journey to Swiss Lodge that you're watching as the dinosaur comes in.
Yeah, there you
go.
It's
the scene where he confronts you.
Yeah, it's very Mel Brooks. It's genius, to be honest.
Yeah,
it'd be like The Matrix, wouldn't it? It'd be like,
yes, it's like
Matrix.
I'm the architect. No, I didn't make the movie. I'm talking about the movie. I'm analysing it. Yes.
But
The Matrix 5, twice as good as Finding Nemo. It's a full title.
But yeah, I love the fun and elaborateness of Niall's as well. Again, like the moon base and going to all these different places. The time travel is obviously quite fun as well. So yeah, they're both serious contenders.
I'm quite worried about these secret rules though, because I'm assuming they're all like animation cliches, and I think mine will probably hit most of them if that's the case.
So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm basically gonna go through the rules that I came up with in reverse order. They're not necessarily animated cliches. They're more just things I wanted you to avoid. So let's just see.
Pitfalls.
So, in terms of who you chose to be the villain, I chose one of the four of us that if any of you said that they were going to be the villain, I would not be happy. And that is David. So both of your films are fine. Mainly, I don't want David to have any power, so there's no way that I would let him be significant to the plot of a movie.
There was me thinking I was the obvious choice as the architect.
I just thought your surname probably lent itself most to the idea of coming up with some, like, animated overlord kind of person as well. So, because, like, let's look at our surnames. If you go for me and McDonald, that's going to be either a farmer or a clown. And
we've established farms are homely and used for stop motion.
Yeah. If we went with Summers, that's too bright and cheerful.
Yeah, X-Men as well. Scott Summers, lots of Buffy Summers, lots of heroic Summerses.
Yeah, and obviously Niall, Sam has no idea of what your surname is based on your Zoom. But just remind us all of your surname.
That is Niall Glynn.
Glynn. Can you honestly, no offense, think of a big baddie called I am Glynn. However, I thought the opportunity with Oscar, because that sounds like it could be quite imperialistic. So
Oscar.
that's why, exactly, yeah. But I really like what you did with the villain names. Obviously, Sam placing yourself much within the narrative because you want to metaphorically and quite literally dissect it. Craig Cheval, I hate people calling me Craig. But that wasn't in my rules, so I can't deduct
bonus
it.
Bonus points.
But that's part of your villain origin.
Yeah, you found a way to trigger me. I'm impressed. Okay, the second rule I put in was in terms of the narrative of the locations. What's interesting is I gave you the 3 locations. I had an expectation of, based on your discussions, obviously this might not necessarily, because you never told me the ending of your films, the sort of location that comes at the end of the city, the medieval place, and the volcano, I chose one that it might be slightly more cliche that's where you would end your discussion of this film. And that area was the volcanic area.
Well, which I did do.
Which is what Sam unfortunately did do. I thought Dinosaurs Volcano, it's the natural conclusion of where they might be wanting to journey to. So I wanted to see if you could put a spin on it.
Yeah, very Bond as well.
Very, very Bond indeed. Whereas Niall, what Niall was able to do was, because of the time travel element, was able to put the volcanic before the medieval. So it was able to sidestep that.
And went to a moon base, which is also Bond-esque.
Yeah, but what I put the rule as I didn't say your end location as a whole. I meant of the 3 locations, where do you end? Presumably, the end of the movie for your story, Sam, would probably be back in the town.
Oh, you'd be back in Paris. Yeah, you'd be back at the restaurant. Yeah, they'd have opened up a small restaurant for raccoons above the restaurant, and
yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the raccoon, because that was this is about the final rule. It's about the name of the raccoon. What do you think this rule might have been?
Rock anything. But I would possibly even just doesn't start with R, which again I would have failed.
That is indeed the rule I put in. Do not name your character, your raccoon, something beginning with R. So reminder, Sam.
Put a pun in there.
So Sam, your raccoon was literally called Racontui.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
So not only does it start with R, it starts with the majority of the word raccoon.
It's true. It's true.
Whereas now, remind us of your raccoon's name.
His name was Chad Armstrong.
Chad Armstrong.
Well, his surname starts with R.
I love that he was a super strong raccoon for some reason as well.
He's got a past.
Is he like Stretch Armstrong? Is he like the raccoon equivalent?
Did that just come up because Alexander Armstrong was briefly mentioned earlier?
No.
Okay.
This is where my brain went.
So
I think it's Stretch Armstrong.
So yeah. So let's look at then how that sort of affected the game. Obviously, we both said that we love both pitches equally for different valid reasons, and that's why it's actually quite good that we had the 3 secret rules insofar as where your creativity can flow. So on the basis of fulfilling 2 of the forbidden rules as opposed to 0, I think that's the case of Niall is the winner. Congratulations, Niall. However, what we will do is if you send us after this call a written a write-up of both of your plots, we can take to social media to see which is the film that the people want to see. So we can see the metaphorical victory as well as the me being pedantic and putting basically trying to like screw with you guys.
We can get some Kickstarters going, see if they get made.
I don't have a good track record with these animation related games that you do, because the Shrek quiz I did not do well. I didn't do badly.
No, you could have won. Win. It was just the unfortunate thing of you forgot one song in the Shrek
in the
karaoke.
big list of the Shrek
and
and the Swamp
kind
Dance
of give
Party.
us the answers earlier, I think, or something.
Yes, I did do. I did do that as well.
I think. Yeah, I mean the benefit for you is that the world will never hear that.
So I just shouldn't have brought it up then. In that case,
we did talk about what happened during when we re-recorded, but Sam, I was wondering as well with your one, when you said about they're back in Paris and they've got the restaurant, does that mean then there's like a moment in which they like look at you like sat down at the restaurant and they're like, surprise me, and like
oh yes, I'm also Antonigo, and they bring me, that's the thing, they bring me the movie which reminds me of an earlier movie that I have seen, which is the movie Ratatouille, and I have the Ratatouille Proustian moment, except with the movie that reminds me of Ratatouille, like his Ratatouille reminded him of his mother's Ratatouille. Oh, this is brilliant. This is excellent. And then, of course, there would be a big dance party.
Why do I feel like if Sam won this game, the film, he would have chosen his Ratatouille?
I'd love it if the metaphor in your film just ran as far as they literally serve you like a Blu-ray disc on a plate and you swallow it. You're not sure how else to visualize it.
Give him a Blu-ray back in a medieval town.
Remember Wolfwalkers? Eat it up.
So, Niall, congratulations. Obviously, this now means that for the next episode, you get to choose which film we'll be discussing. So, basically, just let us know. Is it my choice, David's choices, or do you have a choice of your own based on this episode?
Ooh, is this how it works?
Yep.
Ooh, it's exciting. I've got one in mind that I think could be fun.
Okay.
Yeah, so, well, during the podcast, it's funny because Sam mentioned it. I was thinking of it. Maybe if I win, I'll say Titane and put them through that, which is like a very intense French film. But it almost made me ill, so I don't want to put you guys through that.
I know, when I saw that, I was like, if Niall couldn't handle it, I don't know what I'd be like.
So instead, I'm going to go with another animated film of a very different tone, but also chaotic. I'm going to choose Akira. Because I was talking earlier about anime not really being my bag, but then I remembered, I went to see like the 20th anniversary or whatever 4K of Akira. That was such a bizarre, visceral experience. And I think it'd be a really good chat for you guys. So
not a million miles away from Titan in its way as well.
They're on a similar wavelength.
Body horror.
Yeah.
And one I was going to mention, because I was looking at lists of like, famous animated films or like weird animated films. And that was one which, similar to you, Niall, the kind of anniversary made me kind of like watch it for the first time. A lot of people have mentioned Blade Runner recently when we've been talking about films that inspire them and stuff like that. And this has obviously got very much a Blade Runner-esque nature to it as well. Out of interest, Sam, what would have your pick been if we were, obviously, again, we can sort of put other options into a kind of bag in the future if we have any random picks?
I wanted to pick a stop motion film, but I don't know, a lot of my favorite stop motions I want to pick a movie that you can actually watch and that you wouldn't have to import for like 30 quid on DVD. So, which is what I do. So I thought maybe one of my favorite stop motion movie that you could probably just buy on DVD is an Australian film called Mary and Max, which is about, I'm getting some nods. So it's about a little girl in Australia who becomes pen pals with a autistic man from New York, and they send letters back and forth, and the ways in which their worlds are depicted in stop motion is very interesting. But then I thought, actually, I would have said Rango, because that's another animated sort of Western adjacent movie, which people seem to have forgotten about, and which indeed won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2000 for Best Picture, for Best Animated Feature. I was like, Rango won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2011. Have you forgotten? It won Best Animated Feature in 2011, and that's a movie that people don't talk about enough, despite it being great. Although, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it does feature some dodgy depictions of Native Americans as well. So,
and Johnny Depp. It's
and
Johnny
Depp, yes, possibly best avoided in that sense, but it's a great film if you ever want to check that out.
The style of it and like the way of taking like animals in that sense of not Disney way is fantastic. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we look forward to talking about Akira in our next episode. Everyone at home, if you haven't seen Akira already, currently streaming on Netflix for subscribers, but you can also like rent it as well through like your rental services, or as Niall was mentioning there, they've recently had the anniversary, which means that I think they did a few like Blu-ray, DVD re-releases as well, which are fantastic. So go check that out at home. Thank you again, guys, for joining us. So, Sam, where can we catch you? What have you been up to? What have you got coming up, which we've alluded to previously?
Yeah, well, basically at the minute it's the Disniversity Podcast, which is spelled, and I keep having to say this on podcasts, DISNI, versity as in university, not as in Disney. So it's DISNI. Speaking of titles that aren't Googleable, as were much earlier on, that's something that's following me around. And that is on Twitter. I think it's just at Disniversity on Twitter. And my personal, yes, it's at Disniversity. My personal Twitter is at Sam Summers and then the number 0, another thing that I always have to explain on podcasts. Sam Summers 0. I don't know why.
You're not Googleable, Sam. You need
Googleable.
to.
I tell the story a lot. I might have even told it the last time I was on here. I'm sure I've told it on the podcast before. When I once thought I would find out who Sam Summers was on Twitter so that I could maybe see if they're not active, maybe I can take Sam Summers instead of Sam Summers 0. And it was me. It was me from when I was 14, starting my first Twitter account when Twitter first came out. And then I ignored it for years and then forgot I ever had one and went with Sam Summers 0. So it was like the two Spider-Men pointing at each other. Anyway, what was I talking about? Sam Summers 0. I don't tweet very often, but when I do, it's usually like a 30-tweet thread about animation. So if that's your thing, check that out.
Awesome. Similar with yourself, Niall. You got Niall Glynn, and then you got different with your letterbox. So where can we catch you? What have you been up to?
So you can catch me, as usual, on Twitter, talking absolute nonsense, at Niall Glynn. Twitter recently banned me for 2 hours. The other day, it's a funny story for making a joke about a video game character who punched a boulder. They thought I was encouraging some kind of hateful crime
against boulders.
I had to send him a message saying I literally made a joke about Resident Evil. Please let me back in. So
when did they do that before? Did you say something about Trump or something?
No.
Or you said you were like Trump, that you got like that.
No, they banned me the same day as Trump because I had the audacity of promoting the Mandalorians, the greatest crime of all.
Oh, right, okay.
So yeah, hopefully us Mandalorians, speaking of which, hopefully we'll be back soon to discuss some of the Kenobi goodness on its way. And yeah, on my Twitter you can find links to my letterbox as well if you fancy some very stupid mini reviews. And I'm also starting to work with a site called Cinerama. Really good site, some really excellent writers there, so I recommend giving them a follow and checking out what they're up to. And yeah, I might just plug, because recently I was on my friend's podcast at 250 where they go through the IMDb top 250, and they asked me on for the first time for a very topical episode because we talked about The Batman, the new Batman film. And yeah, spent a nice 3 hours chatting all things about that. Interesting variation of opinions on it, which is nice. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I was glad to see I wasn't the only one who was like on a podcast talking about Batman for 3 hours. But yeah, definitely a film worth deep diving into. Lots to talk about with it. So yeah. Thank you for both joining us again. So go check those guys out on socials. Craig, anything lastly from yourself?
This outro would be so much easier if I knew any French and I could just speak French right now. Cheval! I don't.
So yeah, go check out Akira, ready for our next episode. If you haven't checked out The Town Called Panic, go check that out as well. A lot of fun. And yeah, we look forward to having you join us on the next episode. Thank you again, Sam and Niall.
We'll
catch you on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
To keep up with the latest episodes of Well Good Movies, you can listen to us on all your usual podcast outlets, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and rate us where you can to keep our podcast growing. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Well Good Movies to keep up with the latest news and highlights from all our episodes, as well as tell us what movies you want to be discussed in the future. And if all of that isn't enough, you can also find us at our website, freshtakehub.com/wellgoodmovies, where you can catch all our episodes along with videos and articles deep diving into the worlds of film and television. So what are you waiting for? Go check out the film we'll be discussing in next time's episode.